just how likely is it that the Florida Gators can upset the Texas Longhorns? I don't think it's very likely, but it's crossover Thursday here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Gators or Locked On Longhorns. I am Brandon Olsen. This is Jonathan Davis of Locked On Longhorns. Happy crossover Thursday. You can get started with a big return on FanDuel for the NFL season, NBA season. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bets. You can visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. And I'm just going to be honest with you, Jonathan, because this is just, I don't think anybody's excited for this game right now as much as all of us were. Like, how are you even looking at this game where it's like, oh yeah, the corpse of Florida with just everybody on the injury report, obviously down the QB3. Billy Napier is, depending on who you ask, on his last legs. Some people are trying to say he's definitely coming back next year. Just as Texas, how do you even look at Florida right now from the outside perspective?
Well, I love that you started the episode with the horns down. Like, surely no Texas fan will get offended by that, right? Because all Texas fans don't care about the horns down. So surely nobody will mention it. Right? But,
SEC.
It's funny because, like, coming into the season, I think that when you looked at Texas' schedule, you looked at Georgia, you looked at Oklahoma, and you looked at Texas A&M, and many people thought, with Billy Napier and Florida, this would be a game that, simply would be kind of a lookover game for Texas. And then now we get here, Texas is a 21.5-point favorite. And it feels like a lookover game for Texas, right? It feels like a get-right game after you struggled a little bit against Georgia and Vanderbilt. Like you said, the corpse of Florida, where maybe they had a pulse. Going into Georgia, they had won 3 of their last 4 games. The only loss was in overtime to Tennessee. They were playing inspired football. And then now you're playing with your third-string quarterback. He has a name. I like to call him Yale Boy. We'll get into his name a little bit later. But yeah, it just feels like, I kind of compare it to like one of those non-conference games where it just feels like now Texas is supposed to come in here, put Florida away early, give the fans something to cheer about in DKR, and then everybody moves on about their day. But, what's interesting going into this matchup is a lot of people question whether Billy Napier would even be the head coach of the Florida Gators by the time we got to this point, right? They talked about the murderer's row. They talked about the schedule. But Florida has looked better than at least some, maybe most people thought. I know that you've been very vocal, right? Regardless of how, I guess, animated or regardless of how inspired Florida has looked at times this year, you've been very vocal that Billy Napier should not be the head coach of this football team, regardless of what happens throughout the remaining, games on the schedule. And so I want to get your thoughts on that, right? Florida has looked good. Is there anything they can do against Texas or with the games remaining on their schedule that can change your mind on Billy Napier being the head coach of the Florida Gators?
Yeah, it's tough because I have been I said last year when people started calling for his job, I was like, hey, you got to give him at least year 3 to be able to make an actual decision on him. Week 1 happened and I was like, all right, I'm good. I've made my decision. Back-to-back years, you come out, lay a goose egg in your home opener or in your opener. This year was at home and you got blown out by a team that I still think Miami's a good team. Even before the game, I said, hey, week 1, I picked Florida to win, but I was like, if this game's played in week 8, I feel very different about it because I do think that a lot of it was the portal stuff. But Florida has had too many games where they look horrible. I mean, Texas A&M came into the swamp with Marcel Reed getting the decision to start late in the week, and they came out and dominated you. Didn't even throw the ball for the final 25 minutes of the game because they didn't have to. It's you chuckle. I have to sit through that, Jonathan. Come on. But I think for me, and I've always been open-minded. There's always things that can happen. I do think that it gets a lot harder to convince me. Like if you had Lagway for all these games, and I know right now that they've got DJ Lagway listed as questionable for this week. I don't care what anyone says. I will believe that he's playing if he ever goes out on that field. But I can't see a guy get bumped from the game with a hamstring injury, carted off, and then be like, I'm good to go in a week. That's stuff I can't buy, especially with a dual threat quarterback. There's things Billy Napier can do, but it's a lot harder to convince me of anything if you don't have DJ Lagway, because when it comes down to it, I get it. They're playing hard. That's great. It's incredible to see that no matter how people feel about Billy Napier, he can get these guys. Like, these guys are playing fired up football for him, but you still need to win games. It's year 3, and it's harder to do that now that you have Aiden Warner as your quarterback until DJ Lagway is healthy. I just can't give you the whole, but he didn't have Lagway thing, because I don't know if he'd win those games with DJ Lagway. I saw you lose to 2-7 Arkansas at home last year. I was front row to see you lose that game, and it's too many coaching things for me. So there are things that Billy Napier can do, but it's not one of those things where I can say, hey, you win this game and I'll forgive everything. But there are things Billy Napier can do. I have no faith in this coaching staff to convince me of anything right now. And
not a lot of hope in Gainesville right now. But my question is, if not Billy Napier, then who? Right? Because there has to be somebody out there, or, maybe a couple of guys, a couple of names that can come in and return the Florida Gators to prominence. I mean, when I was in high school, it was Tim Tebow. Florida was the premier team in college football, right? And I mean, yeah, they were the talk of the town. Like, the Florida Gators was just who everybody wanted to root for, who everybody wanted to go play for. And now, and really for the past couple of years, outside of a few games here and there, Florida has been, one of the laughingstocks of college football. It's been one of the laughingstocks of the SEC. And, Texas fans know a lot about that. And now we're talking about blowing out a team potentially that could be, one of the laughingstocks on their schedule. So, when you look at it, because obviously this is something you've thought about, who do you think that's out there, maybe prominent names, maybe names that people aren't really familiar with, that can return, this Gator program to prominence?
I mean, I think everybody, the first name you're going to hear from pretty much anybody you ask that question is going to be Lane Kiffin, right? Like, that's the guy who's always had ties to Florida, and there's always been, Florida's his dream job. And when they fired Mullen, I mean, from what I was told, Lane Kiffin did reach out for the job, and Scott Strickland's like, nope, Napier's my guy. So, which I know, yeah, you chuckle, Jonathan, but I have to live with this.
Hindsight's 2020, right? Of course, we obviously have 3 years of information now to laugh at that, but yeah, it is funny for sure.
It's brutal. I think Lane is probably at the top of many people's list. I do think part of it comes down to finances, right? Lane doesn't have a big buyout, whereas you look at, I know a lot of people mention Dan Lanning. That buyout is going to cost you, with all, because he's like a weird contract as well with Nike shares tied into it too. So you need to give him like $60 million in order to get him away from Oregon. And that's a lot. Lincoln Riley's buyout's just ridiculous.
And Oregon's just a better job. Like, let's be honest. Like, Oregon's just a better job than Florida right now. So I don't know why Dan Lanning would be in the conversation.
Which I can tell you now, people are going to be upset about that. But I do think that there's at least a very strong case that you could say, because Dan Lanning, everyone knows, has pretty unlimited resources right now. Like, I think the biggest knock that anyone will give Oregon is geographically, it's not close to home for many of the top commits or top recruits in the nation, but they still have pretty unlimited resources. Like, Phil Knight's old, and he's just like, hey man, like I need to see my guys win here. Like, let's spend all the money we need to. And I know that there's going to be people that are watching this and they're going to be mad that I am letting you take shots at Florida with Billy Napier and laughing stock stuff. I've been saying for a long time under Billy Napier that that's one of my biggest issues, is that I do think that from the outside perspective, like, again, internally, these kids are playing hard for him right now. Like, they are. There's no other way you could say they're playing hard for him. A game where everybody was like, oh yeah, Georgia's going to probably dust them. No moral victories, but they played hard. They kept it close. And up until they had a big injury and a slew of injuries in the secondary in the second half, they were very much in that game, even in the final few minutes. So I understand that, but externally, Florida's thought of as a dumpster fire right now. And I've said that for a while now under Billy Napier. I think public perception has been just a complete, utter flaw by this coaching staff and by the administration at Florida, where you've got the Jaden Rashada scandal. You've got just all the things that seemingly happen where you go, what the hell is Florida doing? continues to keep happening. And from a national perspective, when you don't have the inside track, I guess we'll say, it looks bad. So I know people are going to be mad at me for not defending Florida with my life right now. It kind of is what it is, I guess. Like that, I don't know how you can argue much of it right now, especially again if you start Aiden Warner against Texas. So.
Yeah, and Texas dealt with that for a long time. It's just the reality in college football. Perspective is everything, right? Perspective controls recruiting. It controls rankings. It just controls everything, like what people believe or think about the program. Your job opportunities. What coaches you can get, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just the thought outside of Gainesville that right now Florida is a joke. This is obviously still a somewhat rich program and, a rich recruiting base. And it's not going to take a lot, I believe, to get Florida back on top. But right now, Florida is looked like as, and a lot of it is because what they've accomplished in the past, right? Because there's a lot of programs that people don't talk about at all, but people talk about Florida and they talk about them in the manner that they do, because like you said, just for the last couple of years, it's been somewhat of a joke, and I'm sure we'll talk about a lot more about Texas after the break. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on Billy Napier, because like I said, a lot of people didn't even think he would make it here. Now it doesn't seem like a lock that he'll be fired at the end of the season. So very interesting stuff going on in Gainesville with the coaching.
Yeah, I hate that you were like, you know what, let's talk more about Billy right now, because I was like, we'll give him a break. I've told
Billy Napier, Aiden Warner,
it's not. And again, I know that people are going to be mad about this, but like, we can call a spade a spade. Texas is a very good football team right now. Florida, again, regardless of how you felt about them before the season, they suffered a lot of injuries. You look at the injury report right now when it's Florida and Texas, and Texas has what, 7-8 guys on the list. Florida's at like 17 right now. They're starting a safety at corner. Like that's where we've gotten a guy who again used to play corner, moved to safety, and is now going back to corner because you've had so many injuries. This game probably going to be pretty brutal. I'm not thrilled about it, but we will talk more about it next on Locked On Gators, Locked On Longhorns. We're back from the break. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA accounts. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth, and these generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month, and the new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. So you can sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk, rates may change, and gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. And you can get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and win $150 in bonus bets if that $5 bet wins. And, I don't know if you know this, Jonathan, but Cade Cunningham is my favorite player in the NBA right now. I'm a Knicks fan, but Cade's just my favorite player in the NBA. And he screwed me last night. Just so you know, I needed 2 threes from him. And right before we started recording this, he was 0 for 5 from 3. So not happening. I am not getting $150 in bonus bets with FanDuel. Thanks, but you can. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Thanks for being Locked On Gators and/or Locked On Longhorns, your first listen of the day. I am Brandon Olsen. This is Jonathan Davis. Sorry, I forgot to horns down after the break. I just had to throw that one in there, too. Hey, look, I know this game's probably going to be ugly. I'm going to still talk where I can talk, and if I know I can bother you, then that's exactly what I'm getting to do there. But, I mean, really, I know, again, people are going to be upset about me seeming somewhat dismissive of Florida this week. I don't think DJ Lagway plays. I can't buy that. Even if he does play, he's not going to be nearly as DJ Lagway as he's like. It's his left hamstring. That's a plant leg when he's stepping to throw. He's not going to be able to make the same throws as usual. He's not going to be able to run as much. Aiden Warner, all due respect, redshirt freshman transfer walk-on quarterback from Yale, making his first career start. If he does do that against Texas on the road at DKR, it's not an easy place to play. They are a very good football team right now. Even if you can say, hey, the defense is playing lights out, they've moved Triquez Bridges from safety to corner for this game. They're very thin right now with injuries, and you can only assume that even though the run game is very effective against Georgia, even with Aiden Warner in there, you can only assume that at some point your defense will get tired and things will get bad. So people are upset about it. But Jonathan, did anything I just say give you some kind of confidence that Florida's really going to do this right now?
No, not necessarily. You could talk about, people and, their feelings on you and being dismissive of this game. But Vegas, who's typically very smart, right? There's a reason that Vegas looks the way it does. They've set this spread at 21.5 for a reason, right? I do think that if DJ Lagway was playing, and it's funny because, you talk about how Billy Napier is, trying to keep people motivated and saying there's a chance. And, there's some gamesmanship by him a little bit. Arch Manning has a better chance to play in this game than DJ Lagway. What I'm saying? Let's be serious here. But I do think, Texas kid able to make some plays. I mean, I saw a stat, 63% completing passes 20 yards down the field. I mean, that is electric. So I do think that even though, Texas right now is the number 2 scoring defense in the country, only behind Army, which, no disrespect to Army, but they're not playing Texas schedule.
They're cheating.
And look, I don't want to disrespect, I don't want to be unpatriotic, so I don't want to disrespect Army, but it's like they're not playing the schedule that Texas is, even if people feel like Texas' schedule has been a little fluffy. And then the number 1 overall defense in the country, and so even though Texas comes in with arguably the best defensive unit in the country, this still could have been a very interesting matchup if you're playing a young superstar in college football by DJ Lagway. But it just kind of feels like all the air was let out the tires when he goes down with the hamstring injury. You're watching against Georgia while they're up, you just see him scream the expletive and you're like, damn, he gets on the cart and he's done. Right. And then, Yale boy comes in, Aiden Warner, and it's just not too great after that. So, I think when you look at Texas coming into this game, really, the key is, can they get right against Florida? You know what I mean? Can they come in and show that they are the team that showed up the first 6 weeks of the season and not the last 2 weeks? Because the last 2 weeks, we've seen some vulnerabilities. We've seen some chinks in the armor. Now, Texas still one of the best teams in the country, number 5 in the college football playoff rankings, or number 6 because you got to move BYU up. I mean, this shit's so damn confusing. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. But, the last couple of weeks, they've looked vulnerable. Obviously, they run into that buzzsaw that is Georgia when Kirby Smart convinces his team that, everybody thinks they suck, and even though Carson Beck threw 3 interceptions, I mean, that defense was lights out, right? 10 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 4 turnovers. The performance they put on in DKR was special, right? And then you say, okay, it's just Georgia. You kind of chalk it up to it's just Georgia. But then you play against Vanderbilt. You're up 14 points. It kind of looks like, okay, Texas is back on track. Then a couple turnovers later, and next thing you know, you're fighting for your life in a dogfight in an onside kick situation at the end of the game. Would you believe, you talked about that defense and the way that they've been playing. Would you believe that Quinn Ewers has been sacked 11 times over the last couple of games? Our quarterbacks have been sacked 11 times over the last couple of games, pressured over 20 times the last 2 games, right? The running game has only averaged 4.2 yards per carry. The run game, the offensive line, a unit that we talked about potentially being the best in college football coming into the season, their run blocking grades have been atrocious the last couple of weeks. So teams have found a way in some form or fashion to stall out this Texas offense, right? Only 15 points against Georgia and then 27 points against Vanderbilt, but only 21 points over the last couple of weeks. That's not what you would expect from a Steve Sarkisian offense. That's not what you would expect from one of the best offensive lines in the country. And that's not what you would expect from Steve Sarkisian, who is a mastermind when it comes to calling offensive football in these type of games. And then all of the weapons that you have on the outside with the receivers and the tight ends, even without Isaiah Bond largely for the last 3 games. So I think when Texas comes into this matchup, it's about, can they get right? Can they look like, once again, one of the best teams in the country, a national championship contender, and a legitimate contender potentially in the SEC title game going against a LSU or a Georgia or a Tennessee? And then when you look at it for Texas, it's kind of a situation where you don't want to come in playing with your food. because you look at the last 4 games on the schedule, and after A&M just lost to South Carolina, none of those teams look just super daunting, right? I know A&M caused Florida some problems, but none of those teams just look super daunting, right? Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, and then Texas A&M. But we saw what happened. Obviously, different situation, but the last time Steve Sarkisian and his troops went into Arkansas, it was really, really bad. And so can Texas come into this game and take care of business and not look ahead to that matchup at Arkansas next week? Now I know that LSU went in there and beat up on Arkansas pretty bad, right? I mean, Jackson Dart and Ole Miss went in there and broke school records that have probably been, been held since the damn revolution. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. You know what I mean? But still, I think that's going to be a tough matchup for the Texas Longhorns. And when you look at them coming in with Aiden Warner, when you look at them, probably, I just don't think Florida's going to have a pulse for 60 minutes. I don't think they're going to be able to play inspired football for 60 minutes. I'm not sure that Aiden Warner can really rally the troops the way that a DJ Lagway could, right? He was bringing hope to Gainesville. I'm not sure that Aiden Warner can do that in the same manner. So the biggest question for Texas is, can you get right? Can you get back to blocking at an elite level, pass blocking and run blocking? Can Quinn Ewers get back to looking like one of the best quarterbacks in the country? We haven't seen that the last couple of weeks. He's also turned the ball over in 4 straight games. Can this running game that Steve Sarkisian is known for get back to imposing their will? And then this defense, that's been great. They have allowed 100 team rushing yards to 3 of the 4 SEC opponents that they played thus far. The only one that didn't is the one that doesn't have a pulse offensively, and that's the Oklahoma Sooners. So with Arkansas on the schedule next week, going into a tough matchup on the road, coming off the bye, can you show up, play Texas Longhorns football, and beat up on a Florida team that, frankly, at this point should not be able to play competitive football with the Texas Longhorns? That's what I'm looking to see from the Longhorns this Saturday, Brandon.
Yeah, I think that, again, it's one of those things where, like, I even wrote down when I was watching Texas, I was like, I think if you can create pressure on Quinn Ewers, that's like he can make mistakes there. And we saw this Florida Gators defense do that in the first half against Carson Beck in Georgia. And
I mean, I think Carson Beck would throw an interception in warmups at this point, but you're right. You know what I'm saying? They certainly put pressure on him and forced him into some throws. And I do think, Quinn Ewers, he just doesn't look like he's having fun playing football right now. But when you're getting pressured 10 plus times a game, that has a lot to do with it. So, if there is a path to victory for the Florida Gators, it's certainly to make Quinn Ewers uncomfortable and force him into mistakes and force Texas into some stalled drives offensively, keep it low scoring, and then try to, throw a haymaker in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think for Florida, you have to – I like to say this when we talk about Kentucky, where I say, Kentucky – I like the saying of you never argue with an idiot because they bring you down to their level and then they beat you with experience, and that's how Kentucky plays football. And I feel like Florida has to do that. Like, they've got to go, hey, we're going to make this ugly, because I do have genuine doubts, and I think everybody should have genuine doubts about Florida's offense being able to consistently move the ball against Texas. 1, because they're a good team, but 2, let's say your run game's working. At some point, it's probably not going to work. Like at some point, even if your run game is working, Texas is probably going to key in on it, and then you're going to be forced with Aiden Warner throwing the ball, and that's probably not going to go great. I don't think he's as horrible as many people say he is, but I don't think he's an SEC quality quarterback. So, and again, even if that's not an insult, he's a redshirt freshman. He's played 3 games in his college football career. Like, this isn't someone that has the expectations to play well. Not having DJ Lagway, he's your wild card. I think that you have to bring this game down and make it ugly and hideous and try to win that way of force pressure on Quinn Ewers, force some mistakes. But one thing that I think Texas would do differently than how Georgia handled things last week when they played is that I feel like Sark would just go, oh, Quinn, you're struggling right now. Like, okay, bring in Arch, and we'll take that approach. We're like, Carson Beck, I feel like Carson could throw 6 picks, and Kirby's like, hey, man, as long as we think we have a chance to win, you're in there. I feel like Sark will yank him. And then things get like, then you go back to, it's a wild card situation. It's a quarterback that's more aggressive with his legs that can still make those plays. And so I think Florida, you have to kind of drag them down to a crappy level of football. And I don't mean crappy as in like, the FCS program. I mean, crappy as in it's going to be really ugly and we're going to get messy. And then you have to win that way. And that's just something where 60 minutes against Texas, I don't think that's realistic to expect. I think we could say, hey, in the few simulations of this game, that's how you'd win it. But I don't think it's realistic to go in there and say, hey, that's what Florida's going to do against Texas.
Yeah. They like to say any given Saturday, and I like to say not this Saturday. I just don't think it's going to happen. But, that's why you got to go out there and play the games.
Yeah, anything can happen. And we will make official predictions in a minute, which I think everybody knows where we're headed with this after the break when we get back for Locked On Gators and Locked On Longhorns. Guys, you ever feel like you need a little boost in the bedroom? Jonathan didn't want to do this ad. It's time you stop worrying about your performance and get Hims so you can feel confident knowing that you can perform any given Saturday. Maybe not this Saturday, but with Hims, they have hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, and Hims can help you find the option that you need. They've got everything for you too. It's not just, there's also hair products, skin products. They got everything with Hims. It's not, they're multifaceted here. All right. So you can start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's Hims, HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized treatment options. Hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products, which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I want you to see me do that. And if you're a Texas fan, you're probably going to need to call Hims now. That's HIMS.com/lockedon. Thanks for your Locked On Gators and Locked On Longhorns, your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. And again, this is one of those things where we do the predictions at the end. Something tells me this won't be too long of a prediction. Can I assume you're picking Texas, Jonathan? Can we do that?
Yeah. The guy in the Texas shirt and the Texas hat is about to say Florida's going to win this game. Look,
hey,
I think when you look at this matchup, Vegas, like I said, has Texas as a 21.5 point favorite. I think the key or, a wild card in this game is a lot has been mentioned about Quinn Ewers' either inability or unwillingness to throw the ball down the field, right? Has I believe a 5.9 ADOT right now, is something you would not expect in a Steve Sarkisian offense. And it's not the offense because Arch Manning's is around 9 or 10, right? So it has a lot to do with Quinn Ewers. And it's not a since he's come back from injury thing, because his highest ADOT in any game this year has been 6.3 in the first game against Colorado State. I think Steve Sarkisian, what he tried to do is get him comfortable against Vanderbilt. I think he does the same thing against Florida, but I think this time it's going to be more down the field. I think they come out, especially at home, and they push it or try to push it down the field all over this Florida defense. I think they'll get the run game going. I think we see the best offensive performance we've seen from this Texas Longhorns football team in about a month. And then I talked about this defense. They've shown up in every game this season. They forced a turnover in every game this season, 17 turnovers, matter of fact, in just 8 games. They've been elite, and I think they show up and show out, and I think they're licking their chops against, Aiden Warner, Yale boy, in this game, a third-string quarterback. So, I think when you look at it, Texas is going to be able to put some points up on the board. I think Quinn Ewers is going to have a really good day. I think Steve Sarkisian is going to open up the offense and kind of get in his ear and tell him to push the ball down the field. I think we're going to run the ball, and I think we're going to play really stout defense, kind of stop the run, get in there in the box, and force, Aiden Warner to make some plays on the outside, which I don't think he'll be able to do. So I think Texas wins and covers 38-10. If Florida is going to, I'm not even going to ask you that because I know you're not going to pick Florida. So what is your pick in this game? Okay. All right. So okay. If Florida is going to win this game, what is one thing that absolutely has to happen? And then what is your pick?
I think if Florida wins, you have to be +3 in the turnover margin. Like, I don't think you could just win the turnover battle. I think you need to win it decisively and handedly there. I obviously think Texas wins. I think if you've listened to what we've been recording for 28 minutes now, I think if you've listened to this, you know where we're heading. But yeah, I think we both agree Texas wins. I don't know if Texas covers, especially if you go into this game and say, hey, Quinn, like, you've got to push the ball downfield. I feel like the games where you're 3-point or 3 touchdown favorites, I feel like that is the game where you have to kind of go, hey, like run the ball, do the simple things, don't try to do too much, don't give them a chance to breathe. And I do think that if you go, hey, Quinn, you've got to be pushing the ball downfield with an offensive line that he's gotten hit quite a bit. It's not like they're going to keep Gunnar Hellman to pass block too much. He's arguably the best tight end in football right now. I think he's really damn good. I think he's going to be a very high draft pick, at least considering being a tight end. But I think that, you can't be throwing the ball deep a ton. You can't be doing that because I think that just opens the door for, hey, we're going to get the ball. And then I think that this game does go under. You mentioned 38-10 was your prediction, if I'm not mistaken there. I would say it's going to be maybe 28-31-ish 10. Like I think Texas will be within the 28-31 range because I do think that one thing Billy Napier loves to do is run the damn clock down when he's an underdog. And I think that's the approach you have to take if you're Florida, because last week we saw, Aiden Warner, you went down by a touchdown. Aiden Warner threw the pick, which by the way, it was an incredibly athletic play by the linebacker, I thought. And so he throws the pick, then they score quickly when your defense is tired. I think you can't be put in a position where the defense is tired. So I think that we see Billy Napier run the clock, run the ball whenever he can, and try to just shorten this game. And that's always been a selling point for him. When he got hired, he came out here and he was like, hey, that's how we won games at Louisiana a lot when we weren't supposed to win, was that we just ran the ball, ran the clock. And now with the running clock, I think it makes it that much easier for a team to just kind of try to take the air out. But the important part there is you've got to at least find some moderate success actually running the football there.
Yeah, we'll see what, the game plan is. Obviously, Billy Napier fighting for his job. So he's going to come in and try to do whatever he can to, beat the Texas Longhorns. I just think they're just too outmatched. At some point, you have to rely on the talent on the field. And I think Texas just has too much of that right now going against this depleted Florida Gators team. So hopefully next year when we come to the Swamp, Brandon Olsen will be a little bit more jacked up for this crossover, and it won't be the damn moratorium that he put on, in this episode. But we still love Brandon. What I'm saying? Still one of the best hosts on the Locked On Podcast Network. And he's not always like this, guys. You know what I'm saying? To my Longhorns fans, he's not always like this. He's usually talking a lot of trash, but, it just shows you the state of the Florida program right now.
Man, look, I love talking trash. I have been pushing David Locke for the 3.5 years I've been here. I'm like, hey, let me curse at people on crossovers. Hasn't happened yet. I'm trying to push it until I get the green light, David. I'm doing it. But yeah, look, I love talking trash, but I gotta be honest with you, man. This is not looking good. And especially if I do chalk trash and the game goes the way that we think it's gonna go, who is gonna be like, oh, that guy knows what he's talking about?
Yeah, protect your peace. I understand. Protect your peace, because if you got on here talking trash and then Texas put it on Florida on Saturday, they're coming. You've dealt with it, so you know how it goes.
I'm gonna deal with it anyway for doing the horns down again. By the way, I'm gonna deal with it anyway for that. So at least
horns up always, baby. Y'all know how it goes.
Horns down. Call hymns. But thanks for making Locked On Gators and Locked On Longhorns your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. For Locked On Gators, I am Brandon Olsen. For Locked On Longhorns, this is Jonathan Davis, and you can find us all with the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.